11:29 at WIOD.
610 WIOD.
The worst talk radio I've ever heard in my life is on WIOD.
Larry King is with us on line 3, and I think Larry's in Washington right now, Andy. Larry's in Washington. We thought we'd bring Bob in to ask Larry a couple of questions. We were all with interest told about some of the comments made by Mr. King to Don Shula over the weekend, and of course Don Shula retired last week as head coach of the Miami Dolphins. Bob Green is in studio with us. Larry. Hello, Larry.
Hi, guys.
How you doing today?
Super.
I understand you're getting ready to go to Los Angeles?
Yeah, the snow stopped after 2.5 days of being trapped here. It's all blue skies now, but we got about 3 feet on the ground, which is, I think,
you guys are absolutely snowed
in Washington.
Yeah. Every time I go to the Midwest a lot. Every time I try to travel up there, it's like every time New York is shut down, the rest of the country gets shut down.
Yeah, well, everything is shut. I mean, if anyone's listening in Miami and they're flying to the Northeast,
Larry, how you
go to
doing?
the airport.
Hi, Larry. Bob Green.
Bob, how are you?
How you doing today?
Fine.
I wanted to take over a little segment here of Phil's show, if I could.
Sure.
Because we were, and I mentioned this to you when I called you originally. First of all, Henry Barrow sends his regards. Not that I've talked to Henry since.
My man, Henry.
Henry sends his regards. Cheryl sends her regards to you.
That's great. Cheryl's still working there?
Yes, she is.
My God, she'll get her Social Security there.
I'm not going to tell her that.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell her that.
God.
We, frankly, Larry, were a little bit taken aback, I guess is the best way to put it, by comments you made to Coach Shula on your program. My understanding was it was Friday evening.
Yeah, well, I was taken aback when I had 2 different friends call me on, I think it was, one called Thursday night and one called Friday when it was learned that Don was going to retire. And they both said, boy, have you heard your old radio station? I said, no, I worked there 20 years. We're the only station ever to do the Dolphins. And they said, they're creaming them to death. I said, what do you mean? Oh, they're Sunday school maniacs are calling in and they're saying personal things about him and they're vilifying him. And there's a guy in the morning looking to knock him off. He should be out of coaching, and he's too old. And another guy criticizing the way he looks. So when I heard that from 2 different people, what I said to Don was, I heard that the station I worked at and you worked at, because Don and I did a show together every day on WIOD for
right.
Was rapping you, and he
Phil
said
Costin,
he hasn't. All he said, well, I'm just finishing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Then he said he hadn't listened to talk radio in 2 years, but that he'd heard about it.
Well,
that's all. So if I'm wrong, tell me where I'm wrong.
Well, first of all, we were not personally attacking Coach Shula. We do a talk show here, as you do. We have several. What we did do, and any talk show would do, certainly relative to a story of this kind of local import, was invite our listeners to call and voice their opinions.
The host had no personal opinions about the coach?
Neil Rogers, quite frankly, if you're speaking of Neil Rogers or Rick and Suds or any of the shows here, had nothing but the most glowing things to say about Coach Shula in his retirement. Now, while he was coaching...
Hold. Neil Rogers has something glowing to say about someone?
Neil was on... The day the retirement was announced, Neil said nothing
I'm talking about before the retirement. I'm talking about after the retirement. After the retirement, the whole city applauded him.
I can assure you this, Larry.
What about before the retirement?
All right, I can assure you there was nothing personal in any negative statement made by Neil Rogers.
What kind of criticisms were they?
That he had his coaching ability had begun to slump, that the game perhaps was passing him by, that it was time to make room for a coach. And as you know, the popularity of Jimmy Johnson here is well known.
I wrote in my column 3 years ago that Jimmy was going to come and coach Miami, and Jimmy told me that in Dallas.
Phil Costin just says hi too. He's in the other studio.
But just let me say this.
Yes.
There's a way you can do it and a way you cannot do it. Now, you can encourage callers to vilify. I've been doing this a long time.
I understand that.
I started.
I know that you were with our radio station for many years. Yeah.
And so I know how to do a talk show.
Daisy Pumpernicks.
And I know how you can storm up a crowd. And the people who told me I have faith in. So you're telling me that Neil Rogers praised him.
Larry,
I would be shocked.
I would not even bother you. I wouldn't even bother you with a phone call where I'm
not talking about after retirement, everybody jumps on the bandwagon. That's below.
No, I'm talking about before Coach Shula announced his retirement.
Were your callers personal or insightful?
The callers, some of the callers may have been, some may have not.
When they were, what did you say to them?
We got rid of them very quickly, to be perfectly honest with you. Many of them were dumped.
Your inciting calls were off the air right away?
They were off the air right away, and I can tell you...
I apologize to Mr. Rogers for his fairness.
Thank you.
To the rest of the staff, and that the 2 people who told me must have been hearing things.
I got to tell you, Larry, I take what I do very seriously.
Hello?
Larry, Bob's a little emotional.
I'm sorry, I take what I do very seriously. And to have our radio station vilified on national...
Now, hold on 1 second, Bob. Your station, I was
Bob,
in Miami. Well, how long have you been general manager?
Get Bob a glass of water or something.
How long have you been general manager?
I've been here since 1992.
Okay, I was in Miami 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The worst talk radio I ever heard in my life was on WIOD. The worst.
You see, it's comments like that I think are very unfair.
Do you want an opinion or not? Do you think Neil Rogers is a good talk show host?
I think he's the best in the business.
I think he's the worst I've ever heard.
I think he's the best in the business.
Well, if you're proud of him, if you're crying because Neil Rogers has been vilified...
What I need to do...
You've got a weird case going here, man.
Larry, could I jump...
Why don't you go on Neil and cry with each other?
All right, Larry, could I jump in for a minute?
This is insane.
Well, I've got a general manager here who's crying. Bob, if you can't handle this, I can do this or whatever we want to do.
I can handle. I never heard a worse station.
All right.
I think that's patently unfair of you, and I would demand an apology for that statement.
For having an opinion?
No, for saying that this is the worst talk radio you've ever heard. You know the influence that you have over people.
It's the worst talk radio I ever heard.
I demand an apology for that statement.
I will not give it to you.
I demand an apology for that statement. I'll ask you again as a gentleman.
What are you asking me to apologize?
To apologize for vilifying a radio station that I give my heart and soul to.
Bob, I think...
Larry's expressing an opinion, Bob.
Bob.
Shut up, Phil.
Shut up,
can
Phil.
shut your mouth.
You're the general manager. You're telling your host to shut up?
Bob, what I'm asking you to do is to
Hey, guys, I don't think... when I was on that station, you could look up class, and you'd get WIOD written as class.
Who did you name somebody
This is an embarrassing thing.
Who did you work with? Who did you work with?
I worked with Big
Owen
Wilson.
Oh, he was terrible.
Goodbye, Bob.
He was absolute... Wait a second.
I'm not going to talk.
No, but wait a second.
Wait a minute. On behalf of the Big Wilson family, I demand an apology for you. Big Wilson passed away, and you called him terrible.
All right, so could the kettle call the pot black? Is that what it is? You come on here...
Apologize to the Wilson family.
All right, I apologize.
All right, now, what do you think of Bill Calder?
Bill Calder was probably one of the best I ever heard.
The great talent. We did loads of things together.
He was a terrific talent. And by the way, he was a very close friend of Neil Rogers.
Do you think Neil Rogers is a talent?
I think Neil Rogers is the preeminent radio talent in America today. Now,
he's the worst talk show host I've ever heard.
I demand an apology.
No.
I demand it.
Bob, we can go back and forth on this, Bob.
Yes.
You don't even know your own station.
On behalf of the Rogers family, apologize.
Bob, we can go back and forth with this all the time.
What is that? And what's that crap supposed to mean?
I apologize.
His mother is listening.
I apologize to Neil Rogers' wife.
What is that crack supposed to mean?
You said his family.
I'm talking about his mother. He has relatives in this area.
No, I would tell his mother that she raised a son who's a terrible talk show host.
Bob, either you can go on with this or you can't.
Bob, you can keep going with this. I'm not going to change my opinion.
I can't believe it.
Well,
I can't.
Bob, listen, man. If you want to come on,
crying for Neil Rogers?
He's like crying over here. Give him
Neil
some
Rogers.
I'm sorry.
Well, sorry, Bob.
Hey, Larry, can I just ask you a question here? Where do you think Coach Shula is going to be going after this? Do you think he's going to? Well,
I think he's going to be he'll be vice president of operations.
He's running the team. Yeah, he's going to run the team from that standpoint. But do you think he might want to entertain any other coaching possibilities?
You know, there's a rumor that Baltimore would ask him.
I want an apology. Bob, shut up.
I don't believe he's the general manager.
You know what? At this point, neither do I.
Yeah, I don't.
All right.
He can't be general manager. Is this a?
Well, I'll tell you something.
Are you still owned by Cox?
Yes, we are owned by Cox Broadcasting.
I do charities for Cox every year, and have made appearances for the Cox people all over the country.
Have you raised money?
I don't.
Thanks a lot, Bob.
So anyway,